Folks, ladies, all right, folks, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another fabulous edition of Torah Studies. This is Torah Studies Live because we are all joined online in this still shut down state of being. We are gathered here online, live on the Zoom platform, live on Facebook, recording now to post on the podcast for the audio. It is great to have you to study together. I sent out an email to some of you. I think some of you received this, talking about how this class will blow your mind. You know, I may engage sometimes in hyperbole. I will tell you this is not meant to be a hyperbolic statement. I'm not using the phrase "blow your mind," loosely. I take it seriously. I take that line very seriously, and my belief is that tonight will blow you away. What it is yet. When we get there, I'll tell you what it is. I want you to be as open-minded as possible to the new thing that I will share with you. I'm going to share with you something new that you may have never heard about in Torah. It's a concept that is very unique. It's a concept that when you hear it for the first time, you think something sounds wrong. Keep an open mind, everything will make sense. Third introduction. We are going to present tonight how we can learn mystical, philosophical, psychological, historical lessons from not an entire narrative, not a mitzvah, not a verse, not even a word, from one letter in Torah. Which reminds me of a story. There were 3 congregants gathered in a park one day. They were each extolling the virtue of their rabbi. The first one says, my rabbi is so amazing, he's incredible. My rabbi can give a sermon on one section, one paragraph of Torah for an hour. That's how brilliant he is. The other guy says, you think that's a great rabbi? You gotta be kidding me. It's nothing. It's nothing. Garnished. You want to hear my rabbi? My rabbi can take a single verse, one verse, and speak about that for a full hour. The third guy says, you think that's great? It's nothing on my rabbi. My rabbi can speak about nothing for an hour. Okay, that's the joke. Now, I'm sure if we were in person, there would be an uproar if I didn't mute you, uproar of laughter. However, tonight, the goal is to share with you how a single letter in Torah contains infinite wisdom. That's the goal. Using a peculiar construct that you may have never heard before. Good. Let's jump in. Today's discussion is going to focus on real estate. Yep. Real estate. I have this timeshare thing that I'm looking to get rid of. I'm joking. Tonight's class is all about real estate. Why do we call it real estate? Like, what did we think? It's fake estate? I mean, what's the alternative? So if you look up real estate, you'll find many different reasons why it's called real estate. Without getting into the details, many different angles on the name real estate. But one thing we know, even if this is not the technical reason why it's called real estate, is that real estate is real. And it's not something that's here today, gone tomorrow. Land is land, property is property. Right? It's like the planet is the planet. That's it. If you bought, a few acres in Manhattan, there you go. You're pretty much set. Or Brooklyn, right? That's what's going on. So, real estate is real. Other stuff is here today, gone tomorrow, with some exceptions. There's some things that are not real estate that are also precious. I mean the new Intown Jewish Academy mug. If you want one of these, order your DIY Shavuot all-nighter kits now. Not right now, right after the class. This is a kit that includes Torah study material, cheesecake, coffee, and this brand new, beautiful ceramic coffee mug. This is meant to be a commercial. If it sounds like a commercial, it's because it is meant to be a commercial. I didn't time it. I just had it next to me, but it all worked out. Baruch Hashem. By the way, because it's a custom stay up all night learning Torah, Shavuot night, or as long as possible, the text on this cup says, it's backwards, I know, we're always up for learning. Get it? Always up for learning. Okay. Good. Getting back. So real estate is real, land is real, property is real, and other stuff breaks. Right? Here today, gone tomorrow. Usually made in China, and it's not here that it doesn't last that long. Let's get into the Torah's law. So here's some historical narrative. After 40 years of wandering in the desert, the Jewish people entered the land of Israel. Moses passed away before the Jews entered the land of Israel. Famously, he remained with his generation, the generation of the Exodus. He remained in the desert. That's where he was buried. Mount Nevoi, or Nebo. We don't know where that is. We don't know where he's buried, but he's buried there. Who leads the Jewish people into Israel? Of course, we know Yehoshua, Joshua. Joshua is the next Jewish leader. He leads the Jewish people into Israel. It takes them 14 years to conquer and settle the land. I will tell you, wars and battles continued for hundreds of years afterwards, or some could say for thousands of years afterwards. We're still fighting over the land, okay? But the initial conquering and settling of the land took Yud Daled Shana, 14 years. 14 years. And after those 14 years, what happened? Joshua went ahead and gave every tribe, every family within the tribe, their specific portion of the land. So let's do this. If you have Zoom, you can have it two ways. You can be looking at speaker view or gallery view. Speaker view means that right now I'm taking up the whole screen. There you go. If that's your preference, more power to you. There's also an option, also known as the Brady Bunch option, which is called gallery view, where you can see a bunch of different pictures on the same screen. I personally have it on gallery view. Why? Because I really don't need to see myself. Already I see myself in a small square. Do I need to see myself in a big square? Probably not. Or rectangle. Okay, so I have it, and plus I want to see all of you. So I have everybody up. I want you, if you have gallery view, this is a good example. How many people do we have? We have 17 people on. Okay, so it's a little bit more than 12. There were 12 tribes. But imagine an area of land, aka the land of Israel. And imagine every tribe has its box. Reuven, Shimon, not Levi. Okay, don't worry about that. Yehuda, Yisachar, Zevulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Yosef, Ephraim, Menashe, Binyamin. 12 tribes, 12 plots of land. Every tribe gets its place, geographically divided. Within each tribe, every family gets its place. Torah tells us in this week's Torah portion, which I should have mentioned at the top, is a double portion, Behar-Bechukotai. The Torah tells us a very important law regarding real estate in the ancient land of Israel. And I say ancient land of Israel because this law only applies when the majority of the Jewish people are living in Israel, which means it does not apply today. When the majority of Jews are living in Israel, this applies. What applies? What I'm about to tell you. And that is that real estate, land that is sold in the land of Israel in ancient times, that land was only sold for a certain number of years. At the end of a certain number of years, all land sales would revert back to the original owner. I'm going to say that one more time. In the ancient land of Israel, when most Jews were living there, if you sold, and when the tribes each had their sections, right? So when you sold land to someone else, the sale was only valid up until a certain time, certain point in time, after which the sale was reversed. Now, obviously, the buyer wouldn't spend a ton of money, full price, like we would spend today on a home that would be, for life. They would only give a certain amount of money, understanding that the sale was going to revert, but the sale reverted. Let me give you the timeline. There's something in Jewish law called Shemitah, which is the 7-year sabbatical cycle. And there's something called the Yova, which is 50 years, 50-year cycle. It's an objective cycle. You don't get to start it when you start it. It started the 14 years of conquering and settling the land. After that, year one, baby. That's when it starts on the clock. 7 years later, the first sabbatical year. 7 years after that, next sabbatical year. On the cycle, 7 years, 7 years, 7 years. 7 times, year 49. The next year is year 50 from this objective cycle. At year 50 is called Yovel. In English, it's called the Jubilee year. I don't know what that means, but that's the translation, Jubilee year. What happens in the Jubilee year? Amongst other things, land sales revert. So, if I sell, again, assuming I live back in ancient times, let's say I'm from the tribe of Judah, Yehuda, yeah, and I have land, and I sell it to someone from the tribe of Reuven. Yeah, you're allowed to buy and sell land. Okay, good, fantastic. I sell it in year 40. All parties know that it's a 10-year sale. It's Jewish law. It's a 10-year sale. In 10 years, it's going to go back. So obviously, whoever bought it is not going to pay a ton of money. If you buy it in year 1, you know you have 50 years of use. You'll spend more, it'll cost more, right? It's kind of prorated. If you buy it in year 49, it's pretty much a 1-year lease. Make sense? Thumbs up if it makes sense so far? I haven't given you the rationale yet. But you know what? I think the Torah does a good enough job of giving the rationale for this. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Let's pull this up right here. Share screen. You should be able to see this now. I'm going to make it a little bit larger so that all of the eyes can see it. Here we go. All right. Let's keep it moving here. Nope, nope, nope. Okay, here we go. This is the relevant verse from Leviticus, our Torah portion. Let's see. Adina Malka. If you don't mind, get us started. Get us rocking and rolling. The land. I just unmuted you. 1 second. I just unmuted you. You're good to go. Go ahead.
The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land belongs to me. For you are strangers and temporary residents with me. Therefore, throughout the land of your possession, you will give redemption for the land. If your brother becomes destitute and sells some of his inherited property, his redeemer who is related to him shall come forth and redeem his brother's sale. And if a man does not have a redeemer, but he gains enough means to afford its redemption, he shall calculate the years for which the land has been sold and return the remainder to the man to whom he sold it, and then he may return to his inheritance.
Okay, we got, that's it. Okay, good, thank you. The Torah here gives us the rationale for the reversal of the sale and also introduces another detail that we're now going to pick up on. The opening paragraph that Adina Malka read, the opening 2 paragraphs that Adina Malka read, give the rationale. Why is it that land sales revert in the Jubilee year? Why? It's a message. For the land belongs to me, God says. Never think that you permanently own the land. I'm going to undo land sales. This is a way to ensure that people do not believe that they, through their own craftiness and brilliance, can start acquiring everything, etc. Everything's going to go back because ultimately God says, I'm eternal, the land is my land, and you're just a temporary dweller, right? You're strangers and temporary residents with me. This is mine. Okay, it's a message, it's a lesson. And therefore, you shall give redemption for the land. Now, the second point, and this is a new point, I didn't mention this before, I wanted to learn it here for the first time in the text, which we did. The Torah tells us that if somebody sells their property, it's a mitzvah to get it back to them and not wait for the automatic reversal that would happen in the Jubilee year. Either way, it would revert back in the Jubilee year. The Torah says, if somebody sells their property, their real estate, out of desperation, they need the money. So it's a mitzvah on a relative, on a friend, a community member, to help the seller get it back. Yes, again, they'll get it back automatically at year 50. But why wait till year 50? Try to get it back, reunite the person who had to sell with their property before that. The understanding is that the person sold only because they were desperate for cash. They needed to cash out. If that's the case, the ideal is we get the person back to their inheritance, to their God-given land, so to speak, and you buy it back for them. Basically, you help them out with the finances, and you satisfy both issues. Does this make sense? Yes? Yes? So ideally, you help this person get it back before the year 50. But the last paragraph said if he doesn't have a redeemer, then what happens? Oh, I'm sorry. If there's no external redeemer, but he himself gets the money, good. Then he himself should pay the buyer prorated rate. He should give him back his money minus the years that the buyer had it, and then he can get it back. In other words, at any point, he can force the reversal of the sale before year 50. I'll say that one more time. This is very important. At any point in time, the Torah is saying the original seller can force the reversal of the sale if he gives the guy money. If he doesn't, it'll revert back, it'll reverse in year 50. If he has the money, or if someone else has the money, the mitzvah is reunite the original owner with the property. That's the halacha. And what's the message? What's the deeper message here? The deeper message is, you and I don't own the land, God owns the land, so therefore, this is the law, this is how God wants it, these are the allocations that God wants it to go back to those original allocations, and that's it. Make sense so far, yes? Okay. The Torah tells us, however, the Torah tells us that there is an exception. There's an exception. We're going to make this really big, because this is what you need to know. This is a big deal for tonight's class. Can't miss this. If you miss this, we're going to be in trouble. Okay, the walled city exception. Look at that. The walled city exception. The law, this is the exception to the law. The law is real estate sales are only valid to year 50, the Jubilee year. At any point, the original owner can buy it back, or somebody can buy it back on his behalf and force the buyer to sell it back. It's not like if he wants to. No, you can force him to give it back. Okay. The exception is the walled city. The exception is the walled city. Ray, if you don't mind, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller because it's a little bit big. Ray, please read. Text 1b, the Torah continues talking about now not just any real estate in the land of Israel, specifically houses, homes in a walled city. Take it away, please.
Of the residential house in a walled city, its redemption may take place until the completion of the year of its sale. Its period of redemption shall be a full year. But if it is not redeemed by the end of a complete year, then that house, which is in the city that has a wall, shall remain permanently the property of the one who purchased it throughout his generations. It will not leave his possession in the Jubilee.
Thank you. Can somebody please unmute yourself and tell me what we just read? Tell me what the exception is in your own words, please. Somebody unmute yourselves at any point right now. Go ahead.
In a walled city, it looks like the property is yours, but
Yes.
not Hashem's.
Yes. Yeah. Well, hold on. In a walled city.
Right. That doesn't make.
Hold on. In a walled city, the Torah is telling us, if you own a home in a walled city, let me explain what walled cities are. Walled cities are the fortified cities. It's the cities that are like the metropolis cities that have walls around them for protection. It's like the big cities. Okay? If you owned a home in a walled city and you sold the home, this was the original inherited home that you got allocated by Joshua back in the day, but you needed the cash, so you sell it. This home, this house, has a different set of laws. This is the one exception. What does the law say? You, the seller, have exactly 1 year to redeem it back, to get it back by redeeming it. Redeeming it means buying it back. If you miss that year, it's done. The general rule is Everything resets like an old Etch-a-Sketch at year 50. Everything goes back to the way it was, with one exception: houses in walled cities. Now you might be wondering why. I'm going to give you 4 explanations why. Don't worry, we're going to explain this. But you need to know the law before we give the explanation. Unlike other property in Israel that always reverts back and can always be redeemed back at any point in time, homes in a walled city are very different. They have a 1-year redemption possibility. After that 1 year, you're done. It's like your warranty, right? You have a 365-day warranty, guarantee, return policy. You can return it, you can revert it, no problem. If you want, no problem. After that, it's yours. Or in this case, after that, it's his. You can't get it back. Year 2 comes around, and you say, look, I got the cash, I want the house back. Nope. Year 50, the Jubilee year, everything's resetting. Nope. The Torah says it belongs to the one who purchased it throughout his generations. It's now a new legacy. It will not leave his possession even in the Jubilee. Year 50 comes around, it does not change. Again, all real estate operates under one law. The exception is homes in a walled city. They do not revert back in the Jubilee year, and you only have 1 year to get it back. Why? Everyone wonders why. All the commentaries ask the question. Many, many answers given. We have a best of, right? Some classic answers. I'm going to skip text 2, Maimonides. Restating what the Torah says, but putting it into legal terms. It's fine. I think we got the laws. Here's the rationale. The Sefer HaChinuch writes. Sefer HaChinuch is a book that explains the rationales of all 613 mitzvot. It's a beautiful work. It's a beautiful book. Every mitzvah, all 613, it gives you the basic explanation or philosophical explanation behind the mitzvah. Okay, let's ask Donna. Donna, please read text number 3 from the Chinuch. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Can't see it. The notion that houses in a walled city could never be reclaimed after a year is intended to promote the appeal of the land of Israel, to encourage the seller to quickly redeem it.
Thank you. According to the Chinuch, it is a sales tactic. Limited time only. You can only buy it back now for 1 year, and that would light the fire under the seller to get it back within the year. So this is what I call the spiritual rationale. What's the spiritual rationale? The land of Israel is holy. And this person owned a home in a walled city in the Holy Land. They were attached to holiness. And what they do? They sold it. They up and got rid of it. The Torah wants to encourage this person to get their claim of Israel back, to once again own a piece of the Holy Land. So what do we tell this person? You better work on it. Find someone to lend you the money. Make it happen. Work an extra job. Get that house back, because if you wait more than a year, it's done. You can't ever get it back. So he says it's psychologically a tactic to get a person reunited with their spiritual heritage. Make sense? Yes? Okay, that's one answer. I have 4 answers. Let's go text number 4. All right, let's do this. Let's ask, let's see, Steve. Steve Horowitz, please read this one. I am muted you. You're good to go. If you don't mind, please read. This is from the Chizkuni. Inasmuch
as the city is walled, it is most likely that the earth of a walled city is usually not conducive for planting, only regarding land upon which so as not to remove one's source of income. Another reason, usually when one purchases a home in a walled city, is it of remaining permanently. And of course, one does not fully settle in someone else's house, nor does he renovate it. Therefore, such a home does not return by Jubilee. But in the case of fields and homes in open cities, which people tend to lease and not necessarily buy, the Torah states that they are returned in the Jubilee year.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, so let me explain. So he gives two reasons, but they're all pretty much the same, follow the same line of thinking, and that is the Chizkuni gives us not a spiritual rationale, but an economic rationale. He says it's all about the economy, baby. He says the following. He says, look, when you have a walled city, it's kind of like downtown, right? You're not planting. It's not a farm. Farms are out of the big cities. Walled cities are the major cities. Therefore, a person who owns a home in a walled city, they don't need that land for their livelihood, i.e. to eat. Someone who has a farm in Israel, someone who's working the land, the Torah says make sure it gets back to them in year 50, make sure it gets back to them even beforehand at any point in time, because if they don't have land, maybe they don't have a farm, and maybe they won't be able to eat. So we want to get farms back to people as soon as possible. But when it comes to homes in walled cities, you don't need the home. I mean, you need a home, right? You need a roof over your head, but you don't need that home for livelihood to eat. Therefore, the Torah has less of an incentive or less of a really pressing desire to get that back to you, right? Makes sense? Economically, the Torah is invested in getting you back your field, your home in a walled city. The Torah says, whatever, you have it, you don't have it, you have a year after that, it's done. That's the first reason. The second reason he gives, the Chizkuni gives, is when you purchase a home, homes bought and sold and bought in walled cities were pretty much permanent dwellings. So when a person buys that home, they're going to settle in and they're going to renovate and they're going to, they're going to put their imprint on it. To take it away from them after that is not right. So you give them a year. So hopefully the person didn't settle in too much. But after a year, it's not right to kick someone out of their house that they invested and maybe renovated and put money into it, invested in it. It's not right. When it comes to a field or other land, whatever, how much investment are you doing? But when it comes to a home in a walled city, or even like a farm or like a farmhouse in a, in an unwalled city, in the outskirts, all right, people are not investing that much. But a home in a walled city, in downtown, midtown, you're going to invest. You buy a home, it's more expensive, you're going to invest in it, you're settling in. A year after that, the buyer gets to keep it. Okay, that is the Chizkuni. So if I had to characterize the Chizkuni, he's giving us economic rationales. The one before that, who was that? The Chinuch. Yes, the Chinuch gives a spiritual reason. We want to incentivize the seller to reconnect with the spiritual heritage, so we kind of light that fire and say, like a threat, you got to get it now or else you're going to miss it out. You're going to miss out on it forever. That's that reason. Economic reason, number one, we don't have much of an incentive to get this house back to the original owner because it's not like a farm. And number two, the new buyer probably invested something in it, and it's not right to throw him out. Okay, next, last reason. This is the Meshech Chachma, and he gives a military reason. He gives a security reason. I love this reason. I think it's beautiful. Rosita, first of all, hi. Second of all, I just unmuted you. Please go ahead where it says walled cities.
Walled cities are cities that are used to protect from enemies. It is where citizens of a country brace if there is a siege.
Yeah.
If the law would be that a home in a walled city would return in the Jubilee year, over the course of 50 years, it is possible that numerous homes will be sold. Then, in the Jubilee year, many former owners will return to their estates, and the city will thus be filled with strangers who are unaware of the ins and outs of the city. They will not be a cohesive and unified front, as they are not acquainted with each other, and they will not be able
I'm moving it on you.
Yeah. I will not be able to support the city. Hence, the Torah gave only 1 year for the home to be returned. Otherwise, it is to be sold forever.
Perfect. I'm sorry for moving it on you. I just wanted to cover up that last line. There's 2 lines. They're not from the text. I don't know why they're there. They're extraneous text. So I wanted to cover it up to not confuse anybody who might be reading it. Here's the deal. The Meshech Chachma gives a beautiful pragmatic rationale, which I actually love. He says, you know why homes in walled cities don't revert back in year 50? Because that would be a disaster. Your walled cities are your fortified cities. That's what protects your entire nation. That's where you keep your military forces. That's where you keep your armaments. That's where everyone runs when there's a siege, behind your walled cities. So what are you going to have? Yeah, an attack in the Jubilee year. You have a bunch of strangers trying to protect the country. Good luck. Therefore, the Torah says you have 1 year to get your house back. Afterwards, you're done. You don't get it back. It doesn't go back in Yovel. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. That's it. The bottom line is, these are 4 rationales. There are many more that are given amongst the commentaries. But here's what I want you to have very clear in your head. When it comes to real estate in Israel, Torah, God wants it to revert. It can always be redeemed. If it's not redeemed, i.e. bought back, it automatically goes back in year 50. The exception is homes in walled cities. 1 year redemption period. Otherwise, it remains the buyer's forever. Beautiful. So far, it should be fairly straightforward. It's about to get mind-bending. Okay? Because of the following. I'm going to read this now. Text 1b. Now, you might be wondering, we just read text 5, right? Rosita just read text 5. So why are we now, the next page, why is it text 1b? So if you notice, it says reprise. Yeah, it's a redo. We're reading it once more. This time, we're going to do better to pay attention, because we didn't pay attention before. Don't worry, it wasn't your fault, but we didn't pay attention before. Take a look at what text 1b actually says in the English, and then I'll show you what it says in the Hebrew. They may not be the same thing. This is talking again about the exception, the homes in walled cities. And it says, you have 1 year to redeem the home, to buy it back if you're the seller. But, and you and I know this already, but let's read it inside. But if it is not redeemed by the end of a complete year, then that house which is in the city that has a wall, right, the walled city home, it shall remain permanently the property of the one who purchased it throughout his generations. It will not leave his possession in the Jubilee. That's what we read before. Correct? Yes? Homes in walled cities, you have 1 year. If not, if you don't get it back by the year, and it's a home in a walled city, then it is permanently the possession of the buyer. Good. That's what we're talking about. But I need to show you something in the Hebrew. For those that can read the Hebrew, you can see what I'm pointing to. For those that cannot, let me explain what's going on. The relevant word in Hebrew is the word lo. In English, you would write it L-O. In Hebrew, there are 2 L-O's. Lo. There's lo with an aleph. Lamed aleph spells lo. Lamed vav. The different spelling is not just an alternate spelling. It's actually, but it means the same thing. The different spelling makes it a completely different word, and actually an opposite word in this context. Let me explain in the Hebrew. The Torah is telling us, if you don't redeem it, and a full year passes, then the home that exists in the city that has a wall or doesn't have a wall. Lo with an aleph means doesn't have a wall. Lo with a vav means has a wall. Now, you and I know what is the exception. Homes in cities with walls or without. Which one? With or without wall? With or without walls? Which city is the exception? Which homes are the exception? Somebody unmute yourself.
The wall.
Wall. That has a wall. But if you look at the Hebrew, the way it's written in the Torah, it says lo choma with an aleph, which is talking suddenly about unwalled cities, which doesn't make any sense. Because the Torah, the paragraph before this said, or the verse before this said, if a person sells a home in a walled city, then he has a year to buy it back. And this verse says, and if he doesn't buy it back within a year, then the house in the unwalled city reverts back. Unwalled city, walled city. The word in the original is lo with an aleph, which means unwalled. And that's the opposite of the meaning. So, we have a tradition. It's called Kri and Ksiv. If you want to know how to write that, I'm highlighting it at the top of this page. Kri and Ksiv. Kri means the way it's pronounced. Ksiv means the way it's written. There are few places in Torah where there's a word written, but you don't read it that way. You read it differently. The word is written one way, but you read it a different way. Usually, it's a different pronunciation. Usually, it's a completely different word. It says one thing in the text, but you read it differently. Very rarely is this the case, but very, very rare occasions throughout Scripture, you will find this. It's called Kri Uksiv. It's pronounced, when you read it, it's pronounced one way, although it's written a different way. Where do these Kri Uksivs come from? Where does this tradition come from? All the way back from Moses. Moses, who got the Torah from God, Moses, who God told him what to write, also told him that when it comes to these very specific words, I want you to write it this way, but read it the other way. What's the meaning behind it? By the way, let's just see this inside. Text number 6, Tractate Nedarim. I'm going to read this very quickly because I'm right in the middle of an idea here and I don't want to get derailed too much. Rabbi Yitzchak said, the textual reading as transmitted by the scribes, the stylistic embellishments, and here's the relevant line, words read in the text but not written. In other words, when you have a word that's written one way, read a different way, words written but omitted in the reading, etc., they're all halacha from Moses at Mount Sinai. Emphasis that. Okay, they were all taught to Moses at Mount Sinai by God Himself, which means it is not a later or a later invention. It is OG, original issue text. Take a look back at this verse. This is our verse. We're going to spend a minute on this. The Torah says, if you sell your house in the walled city and you want to get it back, you have a year. If you don't buy it back in a year, then that house in that city that doesn't have a wall, that's how it's written. So the way we pronounce it is lo with a vav. Although it sounds the same, when we read the Torah, the interpretation is lo with a vav, that it has a city, it has a wall, because we're talking about homes in a walled city. The question is, why is it written this way and the meaning is that way? Why not just write it the way it's meant? The commentators explain every time you have a Kri Uksiv, every time you have a way that it's written one way but read a different way, it means that both words are part of its interpretation. In other words, there is some meaning to the lo with an aleph, which means that there's no wall, even though we're talking about a walled city. There's something about no wall, even though it's talking about a wall. You read it, it has a wall, but it's written no wall because somehow no wall comes in play over here. Rashi himself addresses this. Let's read Rashi. Skipping this. Rashi. Here we go. Let's ask who is here. Let's ask. Let us ask David. David Lazan, please read. Please read text number 8. Rashi explains the double meaning of the lo. No wall, yes wall. Why does the Torah say there's no wall when it is yes wall? Why is it written with an aleph and when it should be written with a vav? What's going on? He explains that both words have a meaning and have an interpretation, and it reveals a beautiful lesson. Take it away.
As the phrase is written, it means which has no wall. Oral tradition teaches us that we read lo, meaning to which there is, hence a city to which there is a wall.
So Rashi opens up by
Rabbi.
saying, basically, by saying there's a question. It's written, no wall, but we read it with a wall because we're talking about a walled city. So what's going on? Take it away, last paragraph.
Our rabbis of blessed memory said, even if the city does not, have a wall now, as it once had one, the laws of our past still apply.
Rashi says there's a double meaning, low, and both make sense. Even if the city right now has low with an aleph, no wall, if it low with a vav had a wall, once upon a time, at the time that Joshua divided the land 14 years after crossing the border at Jericho. Remember I told you before, Joshua settled the land, it took 14 years, yeah? If it had a wall then, low with a vav, if it had a wall then, that city, even if it doesn't have a wall now, low with an aleph, it still has the status of a city with a wall, and the same law would apply to that house. Again, the law of a house in a walled city is, you have 1 year after that, you're done. So why does the Torah write it with an aleph, meaning no wall, when it's talking about a city that has a wall? Rashi says, there's a halacha, there's a law that we learn. What's the status of walled and unwalled cities? At the time of when? The answer is, at the time of Joshua. By the way, the reverse would also be true. If the city has a wall now, but it didn't have a wall then, it's not considered to be a walled city. The status of walled and unwalled cities is the way it was, frozen in time, in the times of Joshua. So if you had a walled city then, it's still a walled city now, even if you can't see the wall. That's what the Torah is telling us. Low, it's written low with an aleph, we read it low with a vav. It has the status, as we read it, it has the status of a walled city, even though when you look at it in the text, I don't see a wall. No, you have to know how to read it. It was time, it had a wall, it has that status today. That's the simple reason. But you know this, if it's 8:18 and we've wrapped up an insight, you know one thing, that is definitely not where we're sticking. This is definitely not where we're landing. This is but one interpretation, a beautiful one, a legalistic one, a practical one, pragmatic, rational, makes sense, but we're going deeper. We're going much deeper. By the way, I started the class by telling you that we're going to learn insights from one letter in Torah. This would be the letter. The word lo, written with an aleph, no wall, pronounced with a vav, lo, yes wall. In the Hebrew, they both sound the same, which is why it's a little bit confusing here. Usually they sound different also. Here, in this case, the two words, they sound the same, so it may sound a little bit meshuggah, but these are two different words. It's written one word, we read it as a different word, but it's off by one letter. So we learn from this one letter the law regarding a city in ancient times that had a wall, that today doesn't have a wall. It still has the status of a walled city. Again, the insight in the introduction that I said would be very maybe obscure, not obscure, but one that you've never heard of, is this notion of kriyu ksiv, that certain words are written one way but read a different way. Maybe you haven't encountered that yet. You should know this is a thing. The tradition goes back to Moses, right? We know how to read it because Moses said how to read it. He says, this is how we're writing it, but this is how you should read it. And the meaning is, there's two layers of meaning. There's the written way and the pronounced way. They both influence our understanding of the verse or of that word. And they both work hand in hand because you have an obvious spelling way and you have a verbal way. So you have both interplayed. And Rashi explains very beautifully. Rashi explains beautifully how they both work together. A city that apparently, obviously, to the eyes, doesn't have a wall, lo with an aleph, still halachically in Jewish law, lo with a vav, it has a wall. You can't see the wall, it has a wall. You still only have 1 year to buy it back, and after that it's done. Okay, I'm done with this simple explanation. Okay, good. If you're looking to buy property in an ancient walled city that doesn't have a wall, I know a guy. Let's move on. Here's what I want to share. I'm going to stop the share for now. Okay. The whole point of this mitzvah, this is how I started the class. The whole point of this mitzvah is to teach us Who is the balabas? You know what balabas means? The bal habayit. Who is the owner? Who's in charge? You see, oftentimes human beings get big heads. Yeah, we get prideful. We get arrogant. We become very self-confident. And we say to ourselves, I got this. I'm in charge. And we forget the truth. The truth is that we are not in charge. The truth is that God is in charge. And God says, I want to remind you that I'm in charge. You buy and you sell and you make deals in real estate and all of this stuff. You're a big macher. Every 50 years, I own the land. I decide who gets it. God says, what does this mean for you and me? We live our lives building things. And primarily building things that we believe will bring us safety. Yeah, we invest and we make money and we put it away and we do this and we do that and we have cheshbonos, we have calculations. If I do this, then I'll be safe and secure physically, emotionally, financially. We have all these ideas. And then something comes along and reminds us that we know nothing. Whether it's a stock market crash, God forbid, or whether it's a real estate crash, God forbid, or whether it's a health crash, God forbid. We build and we build and we build. And we tell ourselves, we convince ourselves that we know it all. That those that came before and didn't make it, or they were vulnerable, it's because they weren't smart enough. But we got everything figured out. I have safe investments, and I play the market, and I have the real estate, and I have the rentals. I got all the stuff worked out. Ich bin a macher, I know exactly what I'm doing. Comes along COVID-19 and says, hold my beer. COVID-19 comes along. 2008 comes along, etc., 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 and says, Herzachain, listen up. God's in control. You can make all the plans in the world, and with one tiny thing, disruption. Disruption, havoc, security, kaput. So who's in charge? The whole point of these mitzvahs was to tell us that you think you buy and sell and you know who owns what. God says, I own the land. I'm in charge. You're here on loaned and borrowed time. Your possessions, yeah, you get to use them, maybe, maybe not. The land, the earth is mine. This is really the essence of a holiday. The holiday that you may know and love as Sukkot. We have a holiday, 8-day holiday, a 9-day holiday in the diaspora, where we build a hut. Well, for 7 days or 8 days. We build a hut and we go out in the hut and we have meals. And it reminds us of how fragile life is. We build palaces. We build compounds. We build mansions. We build McMansions or something, whatever they call them, right? We build all these wonderful edifices. And the truth of the matter is, what do we have really? We have nothing but Avinu Shebashamayim, God in heaven. That's all we have. The only thing we can rely on is God in heaven. Tsunamis and earthquakes and tornadoes and volcanoes. And I should mention lions and tigers and bears, oh my. There's so many things, physically, biologically, financially, economically, that can go wrong. What do we actually have? The only thing we have is the Eibesher Alein, God himself. That's all we have. That's the only constant. The Torah is telling us that you build a wall and you think to yourself, I have a city, I'm going to put a wall around my city. I want to caution you. I'm giving you an interpretation now that is not a literal interpretation, So don't try to fit it in with the other stuff that I explained regarding ancient walled cities and current and modern day walled cities. It's not going to work. I'm giving you a new insight that strips it from the legal and gives a psychological, historical, spiritual perspective. We build walls around our cities. And we say, what's going to protect us? The walls that we built. Yeah, I want to live securely, so I'm going to build a big fortress. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Or tear down this wall. Whatever the original language was. The walls that we build, any wall that anyone has built, nations, great nations have risen, they've all come down. God says, you make a sale, you make a purchase, you build a wall, it doesn't matter. Kili kol haaretz. The land belongs, the entire earth belongs, eternal. And they don't provide. What is the only wall that we have? So what is our rock? What is our protection? What is our wall? The walls that we build are not walls. So what's the wall that we actually have? It's the one wall that doesn't look like a wall. It's the wall that when you look at it, you're like, that's not a wall. That's the wall. Of course, I'm referring to Torah. Torah is our true rock. The Torah is our true wall. The Torah is our true protection. It's the eternal protection of the Jewish people. We are here today. It's not even a question. The only reason why we're here today is because of the Torah. There's nothing else that we've had that we haven't lost. We've lost everything. We've lost our buildings. We've lost our temple. We've lost our, in many ways, a certain way of life. We've lost our dress. We've lost our food. We've lost everything. In other words, it's changed over the years. It hasn't been a constant. The one wall that we have is the one wall that when you look at it, you say, that's not a wall with a vav. That's not a wall. That's no wall with an aleph. I see it. I'm reading the verse. I don't see a wall. There's no wall there. Torah, what kind of wall is that? Torah is going to protect? We need a military. We need strategies. We need finances. We need investments. That's what we need. Torah, what kind of security is that? The Talmud tells a story. Talmud Tractate Gittin tells a story that when the second temple was about to be destroyed, it was the year 68 in the Common Era. The Romans laid siege to the holy city of Jerusalem, led by the Roman general, brutal Roman general, Vespasian. Vespasian was the one who was leading the charge, the general in charge. There were Jews in the city. The whole city was Jewish. There were different factions inside the city. Some groups amongst the Jews said to bargain, negotiate with the Romans. Maybe we'll preserve the city. There were zealots who said, no, let's fight to the death. No Roman will lay foot in Jerusalem. The zealots were so zealous that they burned down all of the storehouses of food in Jerusalem to provoke Jerusalem to war against the Romans. Very misguided strategy. The rabbis were very much against it. The rabbis were not aligned with these zealots. These were the fanatics. The ready to rumble. There was a rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the most prominent rabbis of his time. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai faked his own death. I'm going to say that again. He faked his own death. His students put him in a coffin. They put something foul smelling inside the coffin with him so that it smelled like a no longer alive body. And with that, he said, I need to be buried. Sorry, not he. His students said, we need to bury our rabbi outside the city. The zealots inside that were protecting, they were making sure no Jews surrendered to the enemy, to the Romans, because they wanted everyone to fight against the Romans, not surrender or not negotiate. But the rabbi wanted to negotiate. He faked his own death. They smuggled the coffin out, and he went straight to the tent of Vespasian. He approaches Vespasian, the Roman general, and he says to him, my king. Vespasian says, how dare you? I'm not a king, I'm the general. At that moment, a messenger came from Rome who said, Nero, the Emperor Nero, had died. Vespasian, you are now the new emperor. At that moment, right when the rabbi called him, Your Majesty, he got the message that he had become the new, it wasn't a tweet. It was a message that took a while to get there. It got there right at that moment. Vespasian said, You are a holy man. No one knew that, not even I. I will grant you whatever you're coming to request. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Ten li yavne v'chachameha. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai famously says, my request is, do what you will, but spare the city in Israel, the Israeli city, Yavne v'chachameha, and its scholars. Preserve Yavne as a bastion of Torah scholarship. That's the place where the yeshivot, where the Torah academies were found in Yavne. He said, spare Yavne. He knew that asking too much he would not get. Or, that's a cynical way, I'm sorry, I retract that. Scratch that from the record. He said, spare Yavne and the scholars, i.e. Torah scholarship. Why? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew what I said before. Because anyone who's seen a little bit of Jewish history knows that what I said before is true. And that is, our strength and our survival and our true walls are not the ones made of brick and mortar. They're not even the ones made of stone and cement. They're the ones that are built by Torah and mitzvot. Those are the walls that protect us, individually and collectively. You and I, they protect. Reb Yisrael protects, and Am Yisrael protects. The person named Israel protects, the individual, and the collective. Our strength and our security lies completely in the Torah. And somebody's going to say, the Torah is a protection. The Torah is a book. How can the Torah protect you? You got to have military, finances, fortified cities. What are you talking about, Torah? That's exactly the point. The Torah tells us that you know which city we're talking about. It's the one. You know which city is the one. Yeah, that the sale is permanent. In other words, that our security is permanent. Which one? It's the city that looks like it doesn't have a wall, but has a wall. Lo with an aleph that you read with a vav. It's the city that looks like there's no wall. Torah. What is that? Imaginary protection? What's Torah? It's a book. It's a way of life. So what is it? How can it protect against danger? It looks like it doesn't have a wall, but that's the strongest wall. Because it's God's Torah. And God provides the protection, because God's in charge. And so, my friends, as we face, I think, in my lifetime, unprecedented upheaval and disruption, not only physically, but also economically, and on every different level. Unprecedented upheaval and disruption. It's once again a reminder that all the things that we build and all the things that we tell ourselves will protect us, ultimately could be here today and God forbid gone tomorrow. Anything of physical matter can be wiped away in an instant, even if we think we've got it all figured out. And it reminds us to invest our time and our efforts in what is truly eternal and what truly provides us safety and strength on every different level. Peace of mind, a sense of purpose, and literally a sense of survival, and that is the Torah. So as we conclude today's class, I want to keep on encouraging you to stay positive and stay hopeful and stay connected. And above all, stay plugged into the Torah, because that is ultimately the true protection. I cannot miss out on this opportunity to mention the first time I went to South Africa to visit to Leah's family. Leah's from South Africa. Went to her house in Johannesburg. All of the houses there have walls, fences, electrified fences, barbed wires, security guards outside, signs of security all over the place. And my father-in-law's house has a sign outside. The gate was open. Maybe they were probably expecting us, but whatever. The sign of that sign, because it tells us the truth. Ultimately, listen, lock your doors. do me a favor, lock your doors. You got to also be responsible. But no door in the world can stop, God forbid. I'm not even going to finish the sentence. Yeah? No door in the world. It's only but by the grace of God. It's only by God's protection that we survive, individually and collectively, that we have survived and will continue to survive. It's incredibly that wall that doesn't look like a wall at all that is our true strength. So, things come and go, but Torah is eternal. Let's plug into eternal life. Like they used to say about Coke, Torah, it's really the real thing. Thank you very much for joining me tonight for Torah studies. I hope you enjoyed tonight's lesson. I hope you appreciated the brilliance of what can be learned from one